Hey everyone, welcome to Lurking Shadows. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Here, we explore the darkest and most spine-chilling real-life horror stories out there. For those of you returning, it's great to have you back, my friends. In today's video, we're venturing into unsettling tales from the Alaskan wilderness. From sinister stalkers to eerie creatures that roam the icy landscapes at night. These stories are as mysterious as they are terrifying. The vast beauty of Alaska hides a darkness that's not easily explained. If you've been here for a while, hold on tight, as I'm already working on fresh new stories that will haunt you. And if you're just joining us, thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoy these tales as much as I did in gathering and sharing them. Remember, viewer discretion is advised. I'd been working as a fisheries biologist for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game for nearly a decade when the assignment came through in the summer of 2012. The job was straightforward on paper. Survey salmon runs in the remote streams around Port Chatham, a ghost town on the Kenai Peninsula that's been abandoned since the 1950s. Historical records from the U.S. Census Bureau show the place, once called Portlock, had a thriving cannery community in the early 1900s, but by 1950, every resident had fled, leaving behind homes, equipment, and even personal belongings. Newspaper clippings from the Anchorage Daily Times in 1951 reported mysterious deaths. Loggers found mutilated, bodies dragged into the woods, and whispers among the local Aloneatnight people of a creature called Nantinak, a half-man, half-bear spirit that haunted the area. I dismissed it as folklore at first, the kind of tales that get amplified in isolation, but the department needed data on chum salmon populations, and I was the guy they sent because I knew how to handle myself in the backcountry. We flew in on a float plane from Homer, touching down on the glassy waters of the bay under a sky heavy with low clouds. My partner for the trip was Sarah, a recent grad from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, eager but green, with her backpack stuffed full of notebooks and GPS units. The pilot, an old-timer named Hank who'd been ferrying folks around the peninsula for 40 years, gave us a wary look as he unloaded our gear. "You know about this place?" he asked, his voice gravelly from years of chain smoking. "Folks don't come back sometimes. Last survey team in '98 reported strange tracks. Then one guy vanished. Troopers found his tent shredded, no body." I nodded, recalling the incident from a 1998 Alaska State Troopers report, officially listed as a bear mauling, but with inconsistencies like no claw marks on the fabric, just clean tears as if done by something with opposable thumbs. Sarah laughed it off, but I felt that first prickle of unease as the plane lifted away, leaving us with the sound of waves lapping against the overgrown shore. The old town site was a ruin, nature reclaiming what man had built. Rotted wooden cabins sagged under moss-covered roofs, their windows empty sockets staring out at the dense forest of hemlock and spruce that pressed in from all sides. We set up camp in a clearing near the beach, where the cannery once stood, foundation stones still visible under layers of ferns. According to historical accounts from the Kenai Peninsula Historical Association, the cannery processed thousands of salmon a season until 1949, when workers started disappearing. One logger, Andrew Kamluck, was found in 1931 with his head crushed, body dragged up a mountain trail, as detailed in a coroner's report that noted the injuries weren't consistent with known predators. We pitched our tents, strung bare wire for food storage, and I showed Sarah how to use the satellite phone, our only link to the outside world, since cell service was non-existent in this pocket of wilderness. The first day went smoothly. We hiked upstream along a creek swollen with meltwater, counting reds, those gravel nests where salmon lay eggs, and taking water samples. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and rotting vegetation, and every so often, we'd hear the distant crash of waves or the call of a bald eagle overhead. Sarah was chatty, talking about her thesis on climate impacts on fish migration, but I kept my eyes on the underbrush. I'd read about the Alaska Triangle, that vast region from Anchorage to Juneau to Barrow, where over 16,000 people have vanished since 1988, according to FBI statistics, many without a trace. Port Chatham sits right on its edge, and old-timers blame it on everything from magnetic anomalies to ancient spirits. By evening, we'd documented 47 reds, a solid start, and returned to camp as the light faded into that perpetual Alaskan twilight. That night, the weirdness began subtly. We sat by the fire, eating rehydrated chili, when a low moan echoed from the forest. Sarah froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. Wind, she suggested, but there was no breeze stirring the flames. It came again, deeper, like a wounded animal but with a rhythmic quality, almost like chanting. I grabbed the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the trees, but saw only shadows dancing in the undergrowth. Historical eyewitness accounts from the 1940s, collected by anthropologist Frederica Delaware Laguna in her studies of Alutiiq folklore, describe similar sounds preceding disappearances. Moans that lured people into the woods, attributed to the Nantinak, a shape-shifting entity said to mimic human voices to draw victims close. We dismissed it as a moose or bear, but sleep came fitfully, interrupted by snaps of branches that sounded too deliberate, too close. Day 2 ramped up the tension. We ventured deeper into the valley, following a game trail littered with fresh bear scat. Grizzlies were common here, but these prints were odd, elongated with what looked like toe impressions more human than ursine. Sarah photographed them, joking about Bigfoot, but I recalled a 2009 report from the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization detailing similar tracks in the area, cast and analyzed by experts who noted anomalies like dermal ridges not found in known hoaxes. The stream narrowed, forcing us to wade through knee-deep water, the cold seeping through our hip boots like icy fingers. Around noon, we found the first anomaly. A salmon carcass, not eaten by birds or bears, but arranged in a spiral pattern on a flat rock, fins pointing outward like spokes. No tracks around it, no blood, just the fish's glassy eyes staring up. Sarah's face paled. "Who would do that?" she whispered. I had no answer, but it echoed the bone arrangements described in old logger journals from the 1930s, preserved in the Alaska State Library, where victims' remains were found in ritualistic poses, as if offered to something in the woods. As we pressed on, the forest grew denser, trees twisting into unnatural shapes, branches forming arches that seemed deliberate. The GPS started glitching, signals jumping erratically despite clear skies, mirroring reports from pilots in the Alaska Triangle who experienced compass failures and electronic malfunctions, as documented in FAA incident logs. By mid-afternoon, Sarah spotted something ahead. A figure standing motionless between two spruces, tall and broad-shouldered, covered in matted fur that blended with the bark. It didn't move, didn't breathe visibly, just watched us with eyes that reflected no light. We froze, hearts pounding. "Bear!" Sarah breathed, but bears don't stand bipedal for minutes on end. I raised the bear spray, but when I blinked, it was gone. No sound of retreat, no broken branches. We backtracked quickly, the air growing heavier, like the forest was closing in. Back at camp, the unease solidified into dread. Our food cache had been disturbed, not raided by animals, but rearranged, cans stacked in pyramids, wrappers folded into origami shapes. No paw prints, just those elongated tracks circling the site. Sarah's voice trembled as she suggested we call for extraction, but the sat phone showed no signal, dead despite full battery. Panic set in as night fell. The moans returned, closer now, circling the camp like whispers in a language just beyond comprehension. I built the fire high, but shadows played tricks, forming shapes that looked like elongated figures lurking at the treeline. Around midnight, Sarah screamed. Something had brushed against her tent, leaving long scratches in the nylon, clean and parallel, like fingernails. We huddled together, rifles ready, but the isolation pressed down like a physical weight, the vast wilderness swallowing any hope of rescue. The third day dawned with fog so thick we could barely see 10 feet. We decided to hike to the bay, signal for help with flares, but the trail we'd followed was gone, overgrown overnight, as if the forest had shifted. Disorientation hit hard, compasses spinning wildly, a phenomenon reported in multiple missing persons cases in the region, like the 1972 disappearance of House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, whose plane vanished without trace in the triangle. Hours blurred as we wandered, finding more arranged carcasses. Ravens with wings spread in circles, squirrels posed as if mid-scream. The moans evolved into voices, my name Sarah's, mimicking our tones perfectly, drawing us apart. "Heather," it called, sounding like my wife back home, but twisted, echoing from all directions. Sarah vanished first. One moment she was beside me, the next, only her boot remained, laced tight, placed precisely on a stump. No struggle, no tracks, just gone. I screamed her name, but only the moans answered, growing triumphant. Alone, paranoia consumed me. Every rustle was the Nantinak, every shadow its form. Historical accounts flooded my mind. The 1940s mass exodus after bodies were found dismembered, heads missing, as per trooper reports, and I realized this wasn't folklore, it was a pattern, repeating through decades. I stumbled upon an old cabin, door ajar, inside. Journals from the 1930s, yellowed pages describing the same entity, luring loggers with voices, dragging them into the void. Night fell as I reached the beach, flares spent, but no plane came. The figure appeared then, towering, eyes glowing faintly in the dark, real, visceral, its breath a rancid fog. It didn't attack, it watched, patient, as if savoring the dread. I blacked out, waking to rescuers. Hank had flown back early, concerned. Sarah was never found, joining the thousands lost in the triangle. Official report, exposure, but I know the truth. The Nantinak waits, whispering, for the next fool to wander in. I'd always been a prospector at heart, chasing gold through the wilds of Alaska since the Klondike Rush pulled me north in '98. By the summer of 1900, I'd hooked up with 3 other fellas, Fred, John, and Harry Culp, in Wrangell, all of us hungry for a big strike. We'd heard whispers about Thomas Bay, that cursed inlet north of Petersburg, where the Tlingit folks warned of the Kushtaka, those shape-shifting ottermen who lured sailors and hunters to their doom with cries like dying kin. Old-timers in the saloons laughed it off as native superstition, but the bay had a reputation. Devil's Country, they called it, after a 1790s Russian expedition vanished there, their ship found empty, as per logs in the Sitka archives. No bodies, no tracks, just silence. We ignored it, figuring gold didn't care about legends. We loaded our skiff with picks, pans, and provisions, and set sail under a slate-gray sky, the water chopping like it was alive. The bay was a sight, towering cliffs draped in mist, glaciers calving into the sea with thunderous cracks, and forests so dense they swallowed the light. We anchored near the mouth of the S River, where placer gold was said to wash down from the hills. The air smelled of salt and pine rot, and every wave against the hull sounded like a whisper. That first night, we camped on the beach, fire crackling against the chill. John spun yarns about the Kushtaka, how they mimicked voices to draw you in, turning men into beasts or tearing them apart. Fred scoffed, but I felt eyes on us from the treeline. Probably bears, I told myself. Historical accounts from Tlingit oral histories, recorded by ethnographer John R. Swanton in 1909, described the creatures as half-otter, half-man, with furred bodies and claws, guardians of the wild who punished intruders. We bedded down uneasy, the fog rolling in like a shroud. Next morning, we hiked inland, following the river's gravel bars, panning for color. Flecks of gold showed promise, but the terrain was brutal. Boulders slick with algae, underbrush tearing at our clothes. By noon, we'd split up to cover more ground. I, Charlie, was assigned the upper glacier, a steep climb through a ravine choked with Devil's Club, those thorny stalks that drew blood with every brush. The path narrowed, walls rising like a trap, and the air grew colder, my breath fogging. That's when the first oddity hit, a high-pitched whistle, low-high-low, echoing off the rocks. I froze, rifle ready. Tlingit legends, as detailed in Mary Garado Beck's 1991 book Shamans and Kushtakas, say that's the Kushtaka's call, a signal to lure prey. I shook it off as wind through crevices, but my skin prickled. Climbing higher, the ravine opened to a plateau near the glacier's toe, ice groaning under its weight. The ground was littered with quartz veins, good sign for gold, but something felt wrong. No birds sang, no squirrels chattered, the silence pressed like wet wool. Then, from the brush, another whistle closer, followed by a rustle. I spun, catching movement, a shape, tall and hunched, darting behind a boulder. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice swallowed by the mist. No answer, but the smell hit, rank, like wet fur and decay, strong enough to gag. I edged forward, pickaxe in one hand, rifle in the other. Around the boulder, nothing but tracks, large, elongated prints with claw marks, not bear, not human, similar to those documented in 1925 by a trapper who vanished in the same area, his journal entries preserved in the Alaska State Library describing talon-footed devils. My heart hammered as I pressed on, the glacier's blue ice looming. That's when they appeared. First one, then a dozen, then more, hairy figures scrambling over rocks, galloping on all fours but rising to stand like men. They were covered in coarse, matted fur, black and brown, bodies lean but powerful, arms dangling to their knees. Their faces, God, their faces, were twisted, almost human but feral, with glowing eyes set deep under bony brows, mouths snarling to show yellow teeth. Sores and welts covered their skin, like they'd been rolling in thorns or fighting among themselves. They hopped and leaped, closing in from all sides, their stench overwhelming. One let out that whistle again, and the others joined, a chorus that drilled into my skull, mimicking cries. "Help me, Charlie," in a voice like John's, then laughter, guttural and wrong. Panic surged. I fired the rifle, crack, hitting one in the shoulder. It shrieked, a sound like a woman's scream mixed with an animal's roar, and the pack surged. They moved fast, unnaturally fluid, shape-shifting in the mist. One moment otter-like, slinking low. The next, towering over 7 feet, claws extended. I ran, slipping on ice, thorns ripping my pants. They pursued, hopping over obstacles I had to climb, their breaths hot on my neck. One grabbed my pack, tearing it free, claws raking my back, deep gashes that burned like fire. Blood soaked my shirt, but adrenaline kept me going. I glanced back, 50 of them now, swarming like demons, piling over each other in frenzy, their eyes fixed on me with hungry intelligence. The ravine blurred as I descended, branches whipping my face, roots tripping me. Their whistles pursued, echoing my name. "Charlie, come back." In voices of dead friends from the Klondike, men lost to avalanches. Tlingit stories warn of this. The Kushtaka stealing souls, transforming victims into their kind, dooming them to wander forever, as in the 1700s accounts of missing Russian fur traders near Sitka, attributed to these beings in native testimonies collected by early explorers. I tumbled, rolling down a slope, pickaxe lost, rifle jammed. Hitting bottom, I scrambled up, the pack closing. One leaped, landing feet away, its face inches from mine, formatted with slime, eyes black voids, breath reeking of rot. It swiped, claws grazing my arm, drawing more blood. I bolted for the river, splashing through shallows, the cold numbing my wounds. They hesitated at the water's edge. Legends say they fear running water or dogs, but I had neither. One waded in, shape-shifting to a sleek otter form, swimming fast. I fired blindly, the shot echoing, and it dove under. The others howled, a cacophony that shook the trees. I ran downstream, lungs burning, until I hit the beach camp. Fred and John stared as I collapsed, babbling about devils. They bandaged my scratches, deep, infected-looking, as if poisoned, and we rode out that night, sails catching wind, the bay's cliffs watching like sentinels. Back in Wrangell, Doc said the wounds were from thorns, but they scarred strange, like claw marks, and fever dreams plagued me. Hairy figures whistling in the dark, calling me back. Harry wrote it down years later, after I passed it on, titling it The Strangest Story Ever Told, published posthumously in 1953. But it wasn't a story, it was real. Prospectors avoided Thomas Bay after, with more disappearances. A 1925 trapper found tracks like mine, his body never recovered, per Alaska trooper reports. In 2012, near Kasigluk, a family saw a similar hairy giant, as documented in Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization files, lumbering, ape-like, vanishing into woods. I never returned to Alaska's wilds. The Kushtaka wait there, in the mist, whistling for souls. If you hear that low-high-low, run, before they turn you into one of them. I'd been flying bush planes out of Anchorage for over 15 years when the charter came in during the fall of 1942. The war was raging overseas, but up here in Alaska, life ticked on with supply runs to remote villages and survey flights for the military. This job was different. A group of 4, 2 geologists from the U.S. Geological Survey, a native Tlingit guide named Elias, and a photographer named Bill, wanted to document glacial melt patterns around Lake Iliamna, the largest freshwater lake in Alaska, spanning 1,000 square miles with depths plunging to 1,000 feet. Native legends, passed down through Dinoina Athabascan oral histories recorded by ethnographers like Cornelius Osgood in the 1930s, spoke of Gonakadet, a massive sea creature that lurked in its waters, capsizing boats and dragging fishermen to the depths. Pilots had reported sightings too. A 1920s account from aviator Babe Allsworth described a 30-foot serpent-like form breaking the surface, detailed in local newspapers like the Seward Gateway. I shrugged it off as tall tales fueled by isolation and whiskey, but the pay was good, so I loaded up my de Havilland Beaver floatplane with their gear, and we took off under a bruised sky threatening snow. The flight south was bumpy, winds shearing off the Alaska range whipping us around like a tin can. Lake Iliamna sprawled below, a vast mirror of steel-gray water ringed by volcanic peaks and dense boreal forest, its shores uninhabited except for scattered fishing camps. We skimmed low over the surface, scouting landing spots, and that's when Bill pointed out the first anomaly. A massive ripple trailing our shadow, like something huge was pacing us underwater. "Turbulence," I muttered, but Elias crossed himself, murmuring in Tlingit about the water devil that guarded the lake. Historical records from the Russian era, archived in the Russian-American Company logs from the 1800s, mention similar disturbances. Fur traders vanishing on calm days, their canoes found splintered, attributed to underwater spirits. We touched down smoothly near Pile Bay, skis kissing the pebbled shore, and set up camp amid alder thickets, the lake's waves lapping like hungry tongues. The first day, we motored out in a small aluminum skiff the geologists had trailered in, taking core samples from the lakebed. The water was unnaturally cold, even for September, numbing our hands through gloves. Elias steered, his eyes scanning the horizon, recounting stories his grandfather told. Ghana Cadet, a whale-like beast with a horse's head and spiked tail, punishing those who disrespected the land. A 1940s sighting by pilot Tim LaHaye, reported in the Anchorage Times, described a 60-foot creature surfacing near New Halen, its humped back gleaming before diving with a splash that swamped his floatplane. We laughed uneasily, but as the sun dipped, the lake changed, flat as glass one moment, then bubbling in isolated spots, like breath from below. By evening, back at camp, we'd collected promising samples, but Bill's photos showed odd shadows in the frames, elongated forms not cast by our boat. That night, the weirdness crept in. We sat around the fire, flames dancing against the encroaching dark, when a low thrumming vibrated through the ground, like a distant engine, but rhythmic, pulsing. The geologists checked their seismograph. Nothing registered. Elias went pale, whispering it was the creature's call, luring prey. I dismissed it, but sleep evaded me in my tent, the sound infiltrating my dreams, a deep, mournful hum that evolved into voices, my deceased wife's, calling from the water. Awakening sweat-soaked, I stepped out to a fog-shrouded shore. The lake was alive with bioluminescence, faint green glows swirling in patterns, forming shapes like eyes watching from beneath. A 1959 incident, documented in FAA reports, involved a cargo plane spotting similar glows before engine failure forced an emergency landing. The pilot swore something massive brushed the fuselage underwater. Day 2 dawned clear, but tension hung thick. We ventured farther out, toward the lake's center, where depths dropped precipitously. The geologists lowered their dredge, pulling up silt laced with unusual minerals. Volcanic ash mixed with organic matter that smelled of decay, not the usual freshwater rot. Bill snapped photos incessantly, but Elias grew agitated, pointing to boils on the surface. Large bubbles bursting without wind or current. "It's waking," he said, voice trembling. As we idled, something bumped the hull, hard, deliberate, like a log but moving. The boat rocked, water sloshing over the gunnels. We peered over, nothing visible in the murky depths, but a shadow passed below, longer than our 20-foot skiff, undulating smoothly. Panic flickered in the geologist's eyes. One, Dr. Harlan, recalled a 1930s USGS survey where a team lost a member to unexplained submersion. His body never recovered, as per declassified reports. The bump came again, stronger, tilting us starboard. Elias gunned the motor, but the engine sputtered, coughing black smoke. "It's holding us," Bill yelled, as if tentacles gripped the prop. The thrumming returned, louder, vibrating our bones. From the depths, a shape emerged, a massive head breaching 50 yards off, equine in profile but scaled, eyes like glowing coals reflecting no light, nostrils flaring with steam. It submerged with a tail slap that sent a wave crashing over us, soaking gear and extinguishing the outboard. We drifted helpless as the creature circled, humps breaking surface, 3 or 4 in sequence, estimating 40 to 50 feet long. Elias chanted prayers, while Harlan babbled about cryptids, citing native petroglyphs near Iliamna depicting similar beasts, dated to 1,000 years ago by archaeologists. Night fell as we paddled frantically toward shore, miles away. The fog thickened, disorienting, and the voices began, whispers from the water, mimicking our calls. "Help, over here!" In Bill's voice, then Harlan's. Elias screamed it was Ghana Cadet stealing souls, transforming victims into water spirits doomed to lure others. Per Tlingit folklore compiled in Nora Dauenhauer's 1987 collections. Something rammed the hull again, splintering wood, water flooded in. Bill vanished first, yanked overboard mid-paddle, a splash and gurgle, his camera sinking. We shouted, but only echoes returned, twisted into laughter bubbling up. Harlan went next, clawing at the gunwale as an unseen force pulled him under. His face contorted in terror, nails leaving gouges in the aluminum. Alone with Elias, the creature surfaced closer, its breath fetid like rotting fish and sulfur, eyes fixing on us with ancient malice. The lake glowed brighter, illuminating its form, serpentine body coiling, spikes along the spine glinting. It dove, creating a whirlpool that spun our sinking boat. Elias slipped away in the chaos, his final words a warning. It claims the disrespectful. I clung to debris, the cold sapping strength, visions assaulting me. Drowned faces of past victims, from Russian traders to modern fishermen, all documented in missing persons files spanning centuries. A 1973 sonar scan by the University of Alaska detected large, unidentified objects in the lake, moving at speeds defying known aquatic life, reported in scientific journals like the Journal of Freshwater Ecology. Dawn broke as I washed ashore, hypothermic, babbling to rescuers airlifted after my missed check-in. They found the skiff wreckage, but no bodies. Only Bill's camera, film intact, showing blurred humps and glowing eyes. Official report: boating accident due to weather, but I know Ghana cadet waits, humming in the depths, cursing those who intrude. Pilots still report sightings. A 2018 drone video captured a massive wake near Kijik, analyzed by cryptozoologists as evidence of an unknown species. I never flew over Iliamna again. The whispers haunt my sleep, calling me back to the void. I'd been a volcanologist for the U.S. Geological Survey for nearly a decade when the call came in spring of 1931. The Aniakchak caldera, a 6-mile-wide volcanic crater on the Alaska Peninsula, was showing signs of unrest, seismic tremors, steam vents, and ash plumes reported by native Aleut fishermen who'd ventured near its rim. Historical records from the Russian Orthodox Church archives in Kodiak noted strange activity in the area as far back as 1800, with Aleut elders describing a hungry spirit in the caldera that swallowed men whole, leaving no trace. A 1928 expedition, documented in the Alaska Historical Society's files, lost 3 members who vanished after reporting eerie lights and whispers from the crater floor. The assignment was to monitor the volcano's activity, assess eruption risks, and collect ash samples. I was skeptical of the folklore but eager for the fieldwork, so I packed my gear, seismometers, gas analyzers, and a .30-06 rifle for bears, and boarded a schooner from King Cove with 2 colleagues, Clara, a geochemist, and Paul, a seasoned surveyor who'd mapped half the peninsula. The journey to Aniakchak was treacherous, the Bering Sea churning under a sky like molten lead. We anchored near the caldera's coastal access, a jagged black beach littered with volcanic glass that crunched underfoot like bones. The air reeked of sulfur, thick and acrid, stinging our eyes as we hiked inland through tussock grass and alder thickets. The caldera loomed ahead, its rim a serrated scar against the horizon, 2,500 feet above sea level. By dusk, we'd set up camp just below the rim, tents staked in ash-covered soil, the silence so profound it felt like the world held its breath. That night, as we ate canned beans by lantern light, Paul shared stories he'd heard from Aleut hunters in Unalaska. The caldera was a portal to the underworld, guarded by a spirit called Camulek, who lured intruders with visions of lost loved ones, then consumed them. A 1907 Russian trapper's journal, preserved in the state library, described finding a partner's boots arranged in a circle inside the crater, no body, no tracks, just gone. We laughed it off, but the darkness beyond our camp felt alive, watching. Day 1, we descended into the caldera, a desolate bowl of ash and lava flows, dotted with steaming vents and turquoise lakes that glowed unnaturally under the overcast sky. The seismometers picked up low-frequency tremors, steady but irregular, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Clara collected ash samples, noting their unusual composition, high in organic carbon, as if something living had burned. As we worked, I noticed the silence wasn't just absence of sound but a pressure, like being underwater. Then came the first anomaly, a low hum, pulsing from the crater's center, not mechanical but organic, like a throat vibrating. Paul checked the seismometer. It registered nothing, despite the sound rattling our teeth. Aleut oral histories, recorded by anthropologist Margaret Lantis in the 1940s, described this hum as Camulek's summons, drawing victims to a hidden vent where they vanished. We pressed on, marking waypoints, but my compass spun erratically, a phenomenon noted in USGS logs from other Alaskan volcanic zones, attributed to magnetic anomalies, but never fully explained. By noon, we found something chilling. A circle of rocks, each the size of a fist, arranged with precision around a steaming vent. Inside, a single glove, modern leather, not ours, lay perfectly centered, no dirt or ash on it. Clara photographed it, her hands shaking. "This wasn't here last survey," she said, referencing a 1929 USGS report that mapped the caldera but noted no such formations. Nearby, the ground was pristine, no footprints, no drag marks, just the glove like an offering. The hum grew louder, now accompanied by whispers, our names, faint but clear, in voices that mimicked my mother's, dead since 25. Paul heard his brother, killed in France during the Great War. We exchanged looks, rifles ready, but saw nothing but ash and mist. The air thickened, sulfur mixing with a stench like rotting flesh, forcing us to cover our faces. That night, back at camp, the hum became a chorus, circling the tents. Shadows moved at the edge of our lantern light, tall, angular shapes that vanished when we turned. Clara's gas analyzer spiked, detecting methane and hydrogen sulfide levels high enough to be toxic. Yet we breathed fine, a contradiction that defied her equipment's calibration. Around midnight, Paul woke us, pointing to the caldera's rim. Lights flickered there, not campfires but cold, white pulses like will-o-wisps moving in patterns. A 1917 Aleut fisherman's account, published in a Nome newspaper, described identical lights before his brother vanished in the caldera, his boat found empty, oars neatly crossed. Sleep was impossible. We sat back to back, rifles across our laps, the whispers growing insistent. "Come down, see us," in voices that clawed at our sanity. Day 2, we ventured deeper, toward the vent where the glove had been. The terrain grew treacherous, cracked lava flows, hidden crevices, ash so fine it clung like damp cloth. The hum was constant now, vibrating the ground, and the whispers formed sentences. "You're close, don't leave." Clara found another anomaly, a circle of animal bones, fox, hare, ptarmigan, arranged like the rocks, each skeleton intact, no predation marks, as if disassembled and placed deliberately. A 1930s Aleut elder's testimony, archived in the University of Alaska, described such arrangements as Camulex traps, marking where victims were taken below. Paul's face drained of color. He'd seen something move near the vent, a figure, humanoid but too tall, limbs bending wrong, cloaked in ash-gray mist. I saw it too briefly, before it sank into the ground like smoke. The whispers turned to screams as we approached the vent, a gaping maw exhaling heat and that rotting stench. My flashlight caught something inside, eyes hundreds, glowing red in the dark, not animal but sentient, watching with hunger. Clara screamed, dropping her sample kit, and ran. Paul grabbed her, but the ground shook violently, not seismic, but alive like a beast waking. The eyes surged upward, attached to forms, skeletal, ash-covered, limbs elongated, crawling from the vent like spiders. Their mouths opened, releasing the hum, now deafening, splitting my skull. We ran, stumbling over lava, the creatures pursuing, their movements jerky yet impossibly fast, like marionettes cut loose. Clara tripped, and they were on her, dragging her back toward the vent, her screams swallowed as the earth closed over her. Paul fired his rifle, bullets passing through them like mist, their forms shifting between solid and vapor. Alone, I sprinted for the rim, lungs burning, the screams and hum chasing me. The caldera seemed to reshape itself, paths vanishing, rocks shifting, as if Camulek controlled the terrain. I reached the camp, grabbed the radio, but it was dead, static hissing my name. The creatures circled below, not climbing but watching, their eyes glowing through the fog. I stumbled to the beach, collapsing as the schooner returned. Early, thank God, after fishermen reported ash plumes. Paul was gone by then, his rifle found near the vent, barrel bent like taffy, no blood, no body. Official USGS report, accident, exposure, but the 1931 Aniakchak survey was scrubbed from public records, only surfacing in declassified files decades later. In 1998, a hiker found similar bone circles near the caldera, reported in the Anchorage Daily News, with no explanation. I never returned. The whispers still haunt my dreams, calling me to the hungry dark below. I'd been a radio technician for the Army Air Corps, stationed out of Anchorage, when the orders came in the winter of 1947. Mount Hayes, a 13,832-foot peak in the Alaska Range, was a key observation point during the early Cold War, its remote location perfect for monitoring Soviet activity across the Bering Strait. My job was to maintain a new radar installation at a high-altitude outpost, a metal shack perched on a ridge at 9,000 feet, accessible only by ski plane. The area had a dark history. Athabascan elders, in oral accounts recorded by the University of Alaska in the 1930s, spoke of a malevolent force in the mountain, a sky eater that stole men and machines, leaving only echoes. In 1942, a military C-47 vanished near Hayes, its wreckage never found, as detailed in declassified Army reports, fueling rumors of the Alaska Triangle's pull. Over 16,000 missing since 1988, per FBI records. I packed my tools, a parka, and a .45 pistol, and boarded a ski-equipped Norseman with 2 others. Lieutenant Danvers, a signals officer, and Private Klein, a wiry kid fresh from basic who'd never seen snow like this. The flight in was brutal, turbulence rattling the plane as we skimmed over jagged peaks shrouded in clouds. The pilot, a grizzled vet named Roy, muttered about Hayes being cursed, citing a 1945 incident where a recon plane reported strange lights before losing contact, per FAA logs. We landed on a frozen strip, the wind howling like a living thing, cutting through our gear. The outpost was a squat box of corrugated steel, half buried in snow, its antenna array groaning under ice. Inside, it was bare, cots, a coal stove, and the radar console, its green glow the only warmth in the place. The view was stark, endless peaks fading into a gray void, the sky heavy with the threat of a storm. That first night, we tested the equipment, signals clear despite the isolation. Danvers chain-smoked, filling the shack with haze, while Klein fiddled with a transistor radio, picking up nothing but static that sounded faintly like voices. Day 1, we calibrated the radar, trudging through knee-deep snow to adjust the antenna. The air was thin, each breath a knife, and the cold bit through our gloves, numbing fingers. Around noon, Klein spotted something odd, a set of tracks circling the outpost, too large for a wolf, too human-like for a bear, with claw marks at the toes. They matched descriptions from a 1946 trapper's report in the Delta News, who'd found similar prints before his partner vanished near Hayes, no body recovered. Danvers dismissed it as wind-blown debris, but the tracks looped deliberately, no start or end, as if something had paced us all night. The static on Klein's radio grew worse, forming words, "Stay come," in a voice like my old CO, dead since Normandy. Athabascan legends, per anthropologist Phyllis and Fast's 2002 work, describe the sky eater mimicking voices to lure victims into the peaks, where they're consumed by the mountain itself. That evening, the radar pinged. An anomaly, a massive object moving at 300 knots, too fast for any plane of the era, darting across the screen before vanishing. No visual confirmation, the clouds were too thick. Danvers logged it, referencing a 1947 Air Corps memo about unidentified aerial phenomena near Hayes, dismissed as aurora interference but never explained. The static grew louder, now a chorus of whispers, names of men I'd known, blending with the wind's howl outside. We secured the door, but the shack felt smaller, the walls pressing in. Around midnight, the lights flickered, not the generator, which hummed steady, but something external, like a shadow passing over the bulb. Klein swore he saw eyes outside the window, yellow, unblinking, set in a face too wide, too wrong. I checked, nothing but snow, but the glass was frosted in a spiral pattern, like fingers had traced it. Day 2, the storm hit, a whiteout burying the outpost in drifts. The radar went haywire, showing multiple contacts circling us, vanishing when we tried to lock on. The radio spat voices now, Danvers' sister, Klein's mother, pleading, laughing, then screaming. We shut it off, but the whispers seeped through the walls, carried by the wind. Outside, the tracks multiplied, weaving tighter around the shack, some now ending at the door, claw marks gouged into the steel. A 1948 hiker's account, published in the Fairbanks Daily News Miner, described similar marks before his group fled Hayes, one member missing. We burned coal to keep warm, but the cold was unnatural, seeping through cracks, our breath visible indoors. Klein found something in the snow while clearing a path. A dog tag, not ours, inscribed with a name from the 1942 C-47 crew, pristine despite years exposed. It shouldn't have been there, not unweathered. Night 2 was when it unraveled. The radar screen froze, showing a single mass directly above us, unmoving, impossibly large. The lights died, plunging us into dark, the generator still running. Klein lit a flare, its red glow revealing shapes outside. Tall, gaunt, humanoid but stretched, limbs bending at angles that broke physics, their skin gray like ash, eyes glowing like searchlights. They didn't walk, they glided, leaving no new tracks, their forms flickering like bad film. The whispers became a roar. "Join us up here," in voices of the lost C-47 crew. Danvers fired his pistol through the window, glass shattering. But the figures didn't flinch, their mouths opening to show jagged teeth, exhaling a stench like rotting meat. Klein screamed, bolting for the door, but it slammed shut, locking from outside, though no one was there. The creatures pressed against the walls, scratching, the metal groaning as if squeezed. I grabbed the flare gun, firing through the broken window. The flare arced, illuminating dozens of them, circling, their bodies shifting. Now human, now beast-like, eyes never leaving us. Danvers went next, dragged through the window, his screams cut off as the snow swallowed him. Alone, I barricaded myself with crates, the whispers now inside my head, promising peace if I stepped out. The shack shook, walls buckling, as if the mountain itself was hungry. A 1950 military report, declassified in 2005, noted seismic anomalies near Haze, unexplained by tectonics, as if the peak moved. I blacked out, waking to Roy's plane landing, sent after our missed check-in. Rescuers found the shack half-collapsed, claw marks inside now, Klein's radio melted, Danvers' pistol bent double. No bodies, no blood, just my dog tag, placed in a spiral of stones outside. Official report, avalanche, but the snow was undisturbed. In 1999, climbers on Haze reported lights and voices, per the Anchorage Daily News, with one vanishing, his gear found arranged like mine. I left the service, haunted by the Sky Eater's call, still hearing it in storms, knowing it waits for me to return to the mountain's jaws. I'd been a park ranger for the Chugach National Forest since 1938, stationed out of Seward, when the assignment came to survey Portage Glacier in the spring of 1940. The glacier, a massive wall of ice carving through the Kenai Mountains, was retreating faster than expected, and the Forest Service needed data on its melt patterns to update maps and assess flood risks for nearby Whittier. Local Athabascan and Chugach oral histories, recorded by ethnographer Frederica Delaware Laguna in the 1930s, spoke of a spirit in the ice, a wraith called Tal, said to trap souls in the glacier's crevasses, feeding on fear and memory. A 1935 incident, documented in the Seward Gateway, described a trapper vanishing near the glacier's terminus, his sled found intact but his body gone, with strange, human-like tracks leading into a crevasse. I dismissed it as wilderness myth, packed my snowshoes, ice axe, and .38 revolver, and set out with two others. Ellen, a hydrologist, and Mike, a cartographer who'd mapped half the Chugach. We reached Portage Valley by dog's lead, the team of huskies pulling us through snow-heavy spruce forests under a sky like polished slate. The glacier loomed ahead, a jagged blue monolith, its face pocked with crevasses that groaned as ice shifted deep within. We set up camp on a moraine ridge, a gravel spine overlooking the terminus, where meltwater carved a braided stream below. The air was sharp, smelling of wet stone and ozone, and the silence was broken only by the distant crack of ice calving into the lake. That first night, we huddled around a fire, checking our gear, hypsometers, thermometers, and a clunky radio for updates. Ellen shared a story she'd heard from a Chugach elder in Cordova. Tal could mimic faces in the ice, luring people close before swallowing them, their screams frozen in the glacier forever. A 1920s missionary's journal, archived at the University of Alaska, mentioned a native hunter seeing his dead wife's face in the ice before vanishing. We laughed, but the fire's warmth felt frail against the cold radiating from the glacier. Day one, we trekked onto the ice, roped together for safety, our crampons biting into the frozen surface. The glacier was a maze of seracs, towering ice pillars, and bottomless cracks that swallowed our probes. Ellen measured meltwater flow, noting its milky opacity, while Mike sketched topography, his pencil shaking in the sub-zero wind. Around noon, we found the first oddity, a set of footprints, human-sized but barefoot, pressed into the ice as if melted in, no snow filling them. They led toward a crevasse and stopped abruptly, no return tracks. Mike photographed them, muttering about frostbite victims, but I recalled a 1937 Forest Service report of similar prints near Portage, linked to a missing hiker whose gear was found arranged in a circle on the ice. The air grew heavier, the glacier's groans sounding like distant moans, rhythmic, almost deliberate. By afternoon, the radio crackled with static, spitting fragments of voices. Ellen's name, my mother's, though we'd sent no transmissions. Chugach legends, per de Laguna's work, described tall weaving voices into the wind, mimicking loved ones to draw victims into crevasses. We ignored it, focusing on measurements, but the ice seemed to watch us, its surface reflecting distorted versions of our faces, twisted into grimaces. As dusk fell, we returned to camp, finding our food cache disturbed, not raided, but reorganized, cans stacked in spirals, wrappers folded into sharp-edged shapes. No animal tracks, just those barefoot prints circling the tents, impossibly deep in frozen ground. Ellen's face went pale, she whispered about quitting, but the radio was dead now, no signal despite fresh batteries. That night, the moans grew louder, echoing from the glacier like a chorus of trapped souls. Shadows moved across the ice, not cast by our fire but independent, humanoid shapes gliding without footsteps. Around 1 a.m., Mike woke us, pointing to the glacier's face. Faces appeared in the ice, faint but clear, my father, dead from a fishing accident, Ellen's sister, lost to pneumonia. They shimmered, mouths moving silently, beckoning us closer. A 1939 climber's account, published in the Anchorage Times, described identical visions before his partner fell into a crevasse, body unrecoverable. We stayed in our tents, clutching rifles, but the ice groaned louder, cracks splitting the silence like gunfire. Something scratched at my tent, slow and deliberate, leaving gashes in the canvas, clean, like knife cuts, not claws. Day 2, we pushed deeper into the glacier, driven by duty but gripped by dread. The footprints multiplied, weaving between seracs, some now showing claw-like marks at the toes, as if the walker had transformed mid-stride. Ellen found a thermos, not ours, half buried in a snowdrift, engraved with initials matching the 1935 trappers. It was pristine, no rust, as if placed yesterday. The moans turned to whispers, our names woven into pleas. Help me here, in voices of people we'd buried. My compass spun wildly, a phenomenon noted in Alaska Triangle disappearances, like the 1972 vanishing of a Cessna carrying Congressman Hale Boggs, per FAA records. Near a deep crevasse, we saw it, a figure, tall and translucent, its body shimmering like ice, face shifting between those of our dead. Its eyes were voids, reflecting nothing, and its mouth opened, exhaling a fog that smelled of decay. We ran, ropes tangling, crampons slipping. The figure glided after us, silent but fast, its form fracturing into multiple shapes. Now my father, now Ellen's sister, each whispering our names. Mike screamed, unroping himself, and sprinted toward a serac. The ice cracked beneath him, swallowing him whole, his cry cut off as the crevasse sealed like a mouth. Ellen and I stumbled on, the wraith's whispers deafening, promising peace if we joined it. At camp, we found Mike's pack, neatly placed, contents arranged in a spiral. His watch, map, even a photo of his wife, all untouched by snow. The glacier groaned louder, as if laughing, and the faces in the ice multiplied, dozens now, staring from every surface. Alone with Ellen, we fled for the valley, dogs led abandoned, the huskies howling as shadows circled them. The wraith appeared again, gliding across the ice, its form now a hybrid, part human, part beast, claws glinting like frost. Ellen tripped, and it was on her, dragging her toward a crevasse, her screams fading as the ice closed. I reached the sled, cutting the dogs free, and ran for Whittier, the whispers chasing me. Stay, you belong. I collapsed miles later, rescued by a trapper who'd seen my signal fire. No trace of Ellen or Mike, just their gear, arranged in spirals near the glacier, per a 1940 Forest Service report. In 1995, climbers found similar patterns, boots, tools in perfect circles, reported in the Anchorage Daily News, no owners found. I quit the service, haunted by tall faces, still seeing them in every frozen window, calling me back to the ice's embrace. I'd been a trapper in Alaska's Brooks Range for nearly a decade, working the remote Noatak River Valley by the summer of 1927. The Noatak, a 420-mile ribbon of glacial water cutting through tundra and spruce, was prime for beaver and mink, but it carried a shadow. Inupiat elders in Kotzebue, whose stories were later recorded by anthropologist Ernest Birch in the 1970s, spoke of a spirit called the Tunrak, a phantom that haunted the river's bends, appearing as a shimmering figure to lure trappers into the current, where they vanished without a trace. A 1920 incident, reported in the Nome Nugget, described a prospector's canoe found empty near the river's headwaters, his traps neatly stacked on the bank, no footprints leading away. I brushed it off as superstition, packed my canoe with traps, a .30-30 rifle, and enough smoked fish for a month, and set out alone from Noatak village, paddling upstream under a sky streaked with auroras. The river was alive, its waters cold and clear, reflecting the midnight sun's glow. I camped on gravel bars, setting traps along willow-choked banks where beaver dams churned the current. The silence was heavy, broken only by the gurgle of water and the occasional howl of a wolf. My first night, I built a fire near a bend where the river carved a deep channel, the air thick with the scent of wet moss and pine. As I cooked, a shimmer caught my eye, light dancing on the water, not from the sky but from below, like a lantern moving under the surface. I chalked it up to aurora reflections, but Inupiat tales, per Birch, warned of Tunrak's glow, a lure to draw victims close. I slept with the rifle beside me, the river's murmur sounding too much like whispers. Day 2, I checked traps, finding good pelts but noticing oddities. Some traps were sprung but empty, their bait arranged in spirals on nearby rocks, untouched by animals. No tracks, no claw marks, just the bait, placed with care. A 1918 trapper's journal, preserved in the Alaska State Library, described similar arrangements before the man disappeared. His canoe found drifting, oars crossed. The shimmer returned that afternoon stronger, moving against the current, a pale, human-like shape beneath the water, its edges blurred like heat haze. I paddled away, heart pounding, but the river seemed to shift, bends appearing where my map showed straight runs. My compass needle twitched, useless, a phenomenon linked to the Alaska Triangle, where over 16,000 have vanished since 1988, per FBI records. That night, the whispers started, my name, spoken by my brother, lost to a blizzard in 24, coming from the river's depths. I scanned the water with my lantern, eyes stared back, pale and unblinking, just below the surface, attached to a figure that shimmered like liquid glass. It rose, half out, its face a distorted mirror of my brother's, mouth moving to form words. "Come stay." I fired a warning shot, the crack echoing, and it sank, the glow fading. Inupiat lore says Tunrak wears the faces of the dead to trap the living, binding their souls to the river. Sleep didn't come. The whispers grew, joined by others, my mother, my old dog, pleading, laughing, then weeping. Day 3, the river turned hostile. My traps were gone, not washed away but removed, their chains coiled in perfect loops on the bank, each with a single stone at the center, polished and round, like an offering. The shimmer followed me now, pacing the canoe, sometimes splitting into multiple forms, 3, 4, darting under the surface, their glow pulsing like a heartbeat. I found a knife, not mine, half buried in the mud, its handle carved with Inupiat symbols matching those from a 1922 missing trapper's gear, per a Kotzebue elder's account. The river's current grew erratic, pulling me toward rapids I didn't recall. At one bend, the water boiled, and a figure surfaced, tall, translucent, its body rippling like the river itself, arms long and webbed, face shifting between my brother's and something eyeless, mouthless. It reached, fingers grazing the canoe, leaving frost-like burns on the wood. I paddled hard, aiming for a shallow bar, but the river fought me, waves rising without wind, slamming the hull. The whispers became screams, a chorus of the dead urging me to dive in. The figure appeared again, now on the bank, standing motionless, its glow casting no shadow. I fired, bullets passing through, splashing the water behind. It moved closer, gliding without steps, its touch freezing my paddle, cracking it like glass. A 1925 Coast Guard report noted a similar encounter near the Noatak's mouth. A fisherman pulled from his boat, his screams heard but body gone, canoe untouched. Panic took over. I abandoned gear, running across the tundra, the river's roar chasing me, the glow never far behind. Night fell, the auroras blazing, and the Tunrak multiplied, dozens of shapes, each wearing a face I knew, circling as I stumbled through willows. Their glow lit the ground, revealing more stones, arranged in spirals, each marking where my traps had been. My strength faded, legs heavy as if the river pulled me back. I collapsed near a ridge, waking to a rescue party from Noatak village, alerted by my missed check-in. My canoe was found downstream, empty, traps stacked neatly inside, no sign of struggle. The official report called it exposure, but I know the truth. In 1993, a kayaker reported a glowing figure near the Noatak, per the Fairbanks Daily News Miner, vanishing with his partner, their gear arranged in spirals. I never trapped again. The river's whispers still haunt me, Tunrak's glow waiting to pull me under.